Welcome to Stop Whining About Real Estate. Join us as we chat, sip, banter, and wine with the best in the biz. Grab a glass of your favorite vino, sit back, relax, and let's wine together.
Hey everybody, Emmanuel St. Germain here. Welcome to Stop Whining About Real Estate. I've got my cohort, Sarah Birnbaum here, and we've got a really special guest today. We got one of my great friends, Jerron Kelly. He is a partner at Kelly & Grant Law Firm. Welcome to the episode.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. It's great to be here.
We're excited to have you.
Yeah, good stuff. I've been in this office more than once.
So we're lucky enough to not only have we known Jerron a really long time, he's a friend of the family, but he also has his own podcast and films in the same studio as we do. So it's a nice, easy transition. He knows that. In fact, I think you paid for these chairs.
I think I actually did.
You're right at home.
Yeah, I feel right at home. There you go. Feeling comfortable.
They're working out great, so thank you.
Well, good. Thank you. They are pretty comfy. I've got a bad back, and I always leave here, without back pain. So that's good.
There you go. So one of the things, so Jerron is, we do a lot of title work with his company and ours. And so tell us a little bit for the audience who, one of the questions that we often get is, people are always asking, they understand that you're doing the closing, they understand that aspect of it. But the largest of the fees here in Florida, anyways, in the title world, tends to be title insurance. Mm-hmm. And, it always says, well, this is optional. Why am I doing this? And so just if you could explain to the audience a little bit about what title insurance is.
Sure, absolutely. So let me say two things before I actually get to the exact question. First of all, just a quick background on who I am so people get who's speaking to them right now. As you said, I'm one of the partners here at Kelly & Grant. We're a real estate law firm, full service. We have 5 attorneys. We have 22 paralegals. We do a variety of different areas of real estate law, not just closings. We have a real estate litigation attorney. We have an association law attorney, a wills, trust, probate, and estate attorney. We also do a high volume of evictions, about 250 to 300 a month for investors throughout the state every month. And then we also have probably about 80 to 100 transactions in process at any given time. So that just kind of gives you an idea of sort of who we are. So it's
scope and size.
Yeah, we're scope and size, and which gets to the next point is we are a law firm. We're not a title company. So we get this question a lot for maybe people moving to Florida, especially people from California, where I think they use escrow companies. Yep. In New York, New Jersey, Massachusetts, Northeast, they use attorneys who are on the buy side, the sales side, and then also oftentimes on the lender side. Sometimes there's 3 attorneys in a transaction, a lot of attorneys, but it's hard enough to have one in a transaction. But here in Florida, we're a little different. We have title companies, of course, and we have law firms. And then the next natural question is, what's the difference between the two? A title company can close most transactions, especially residential transactions. Unless they're attorney-owned, though, and managed and actively have an attorney actively working in the business, they cannot do certain things. Like, for example, they can't give legal advice. They can't do buyer or seller representation. So counseling the clients on legal questions that they have, or if they, sometimes we'll have clients that will come to us and say, Jerron, I'm very upset that the seller is doing this. What are my rights under the contract, and what can I do? Can I get out of this deal, or can I enforce the terms of the contract on the seller, or vice versa? Well, we represent sellers too many times. So we can do that as attorneys. Typically, our fees are no more than any title company that are out there, and sometimes they're even less than some that we see of our competitors. So we get that question a lot. Is it more expensive to use an attorney? No. In most cases, I have seen attorneys that overcharge, but I've seen title companies that charge more than what's normal in the industry.
Before you go to the title, sorry to interrupt you, but before you go to the title insurance, because
I'm working my way there.
No, but before you mentioned something that I think is really important, and I know firsthand on a transaction that we're dealing with now, and I know that you know firsthand, Sarah, on a transaction that you did, that the concept of, unless you understand the contract inside and out, right, having a real estate attorney on your side that can help you navigate the other side for the most part. When I say the other side, meaning if you are a buyer, ladies and gentlemen, the seller is not your friend. these are opposing, you have opposing wishes. The seller wants to get it, and I don't mean just in terms of a negotiation, in terms of a sales price. That's only one aspect of the contract. But when things start to go awry, exactly as you explained, having someone that has the guidance and the experience that you have, right? A homeowner, how many homes have you bought in your life? One, right? So this is very typical. Most individuals have only purchased one, maybe two houses. You and I, right? You in this case, I don't know, we've done thousands of transactions in our lifetime. Yeah. And so you take that experience and you are able to help the individual feel at peace and make sure that they've got someone who's actually has their best wishes on their side, and making sure that you're getting what your client deserves.
100%. And the analogy is the same for a lender, a loan officer, like you guys. So you could have someone who's been in the business for 10 minutes or for 6 months, and they've done 2 or 3 transactions.
Don't try and age me, but
well,
20 years is 20 years.
You said thousands of transactions.
I think I started when I was 15.
You're a producer, but you didn't do thousands in a year or two.
He's got one of the smaller numbers for licensing, so he's one of the early ones.
Yes.
So 100%. So that you want to have someone who's experienced on your side for whatever that is. As a lender, as a title company, I want an experienced inspector when they're inspecting my property. I don't want someone who just left school. Yeah. Agent, of course. With experience comes a wisdom. And what is the wisdom? It's learning from mistakes, past mistakes. And we luckily get paid to learn from the mistakes of others. So I've seen the mistakes that realtors have made. I've seen the mistakes buyers have made and sellers have made. And sadly, I'll tell you, they're using me as an attorney, but I'd say about 80 to 90% of the time, I don't even see the contract until it's fully executed. So I'm stuck with the document that I'm given. And I really recommend for those people that are out there, you really want to consider having an attorney take a look at your contract and give it a quick review. Like oftentimes, if let's say we're not even handling the transaction, I'll probably charge a half an hour of time to look at a contract and hop on a phone call with a client. I'm not charging $500 or $1,000 for something like that. I'll probably charge like $225 to spend a half an hour of my time to go through a contract, and it's worth it because once you sign on the dotted line and you initial that contract and sign it, you're stuck with what the terms are, and your escrow deposit as a buyer is at risk. And if you have you're buying a $500,000 house and you have a 5% escrow deposit at $25,000, that's fully at risk if you don't live by the terms of that contract. For example, you come in with a bad appraisal, but the appraisal comes in after the appraisal deadline or the financing contingency deadline. You're stuck. It's
a cash contract.
Right. So exactly. There goes your financing contingency, and you either got to pay up or there's no canceling it or lose your deposit. So we're getting a little off track here. But back to your original question of title policy. So in Florida, the title policy is set by the state. It's called a promulgated rate, and the state of Florida sets the title policy amount based on the purchase price. So if the purchase price is $500,000, I mean, don't quote me on this, but let's say maybe the policy is about, I don't know, $2,700 or
oh my gosh.
It's $2,575. So it's $575 for your first $100,000, $500.
It's a calculator.
Well, it is because we are
close. I was within $200.
So yes,
I mean, he almost had it to the penny.
That was good. I'm going to test him later and see. But obviously, if it's a $250,000 house, then it's significantly less, and it's calculated in different amounts based on different. The policy, like a $10 million policy, obviously is going to be much more expensive than a $500,000 policy, but it's not a direct correlation because the amounts per thousand go down in time. Bottom line here, though, is that the policy amount is set by the state of Florida. So whether you come to Susie Smith Title Company or Kelly and Grant Law Firm or Joe Blow Law Firm, you're going to pay the same amount for the title policy. Again, it's based on the purchase price. So then the next natural question is, why do people need policies?
Why do I need it?
Right, exactly. Number one, if you're getting financing, the lender requires it. So the lender is always going to require a lender policy, a loan policy. So you're going to you're going to need to pay for that as the buyer. And then there's an owner's policy as well. Typically, Palm Beach County and, well, let's say about 62 or 63 of the 67 counties in Florida, typically seller chooses the title company and then pays for the owner's policy. And then the lender's policy is paid for always by the buyer. But for example, in Broward and Miami-Dade County, those are two of the about 4 counties that have a buyer pays. Yep. So the buyer's going to pay the owner's and the lender's policy. It gets a little complicated, and I don't want people's eyes to glaze over, but let's say you're in Palm Beach County, the seller's going to pay the lion's share of that, let's say $2,500 for the promulgated rate. The lender's policy is going to be a much smaller amount. It could be as little as maybe $100 or $75, depending on what things that the lender needs on there. They want certain protections. Again, I don't want to get too technical in the amounts here, but the whole purpose of a title policy is to ensure the lender and the buyer, the owner's policy is for the buyer, the lender's policy is for the lender, that if there's a cloud on title that's found after closing, that they will fight to clear that title? Great question. So I'll give you a few examples of clouds on title. The easiest one that I've seen that is missed sometimes by title underwriters and title insurance companies is a loan. Sometimes they don't see that a loan was, like, for example, second mortgage or a HELOC. They miss those, and they search the public records. They come up with a title commitment. We, as the title agent, clear everything that's on that title commitment that needs to be cleared. So we'll get payoffs for the mortgages. We'll get a satisfaction of lien. We'll close out contractors' notices of commencement, and we'll handle the clearing of title. But sometimes the title underwriter who's doing that search misses things. And again, I'd say the limited number of times that we do have title claims, a lot of times it's been that they miss one of these loans. And again, normally it's like a second mortgage or a HELOC.
Is this all right? So let's give a real life example to try and yes. really dumb it down for all of us. So Sarah buys a house, yep. and all the title work has been done, and the lender got their title insurance, and she got the simultaneous issue and got yep. the owner's policy. And then all of a sudden, a second lien mortgage company that the seller previously had writes to her and says, hey, you owe us this money. This was attached to the house. Is exactly. that how it works?
Yeah. So what'll happen in time is they're going to get some kind of notice that they're late on payments for this second mortgage or for this equity line.
The seller would?
The seller would.
Okay,
typically,
gotcha.
It's the seller, and the seller's going to say, I mean, it's possible that some mail could still be coming to the mailbox. So maybe the buyer's going to open it, or if it escalates to a certain point, then maybe they would actually send it to the homeowner because the lien is still on the property. That mortgage is the lien. But bottom line is someone's going to notify us, and they're going to say, what happened here? Why are they asking me for the $25,000 for the second mortgage or the equity line? And then we're going to investigate, and we're going to go send this to our title insurance underwriter and say, hey, on our title commitment, it never showed this $25,000 equity line. What's going on? They'll investigate the records, and then they may say, oops, we messed up. Now we're going to go make it right. There's a process to making it right. But they will they'll do any number of things, but they may just write a check and pay it off. They may negotiate with the lender to see if they can get a discounted amount to pay it off.
But it's their responsibility.
But it's their responsibility.
But
exactly.
The point is that I was trying to make regarding that is that although the seller, who is now no longer involved, you're the owner of the house, when you do any kind of loan, a lien is something that is guaranteed by you, but the collateral is the house.
Right.
So even though that person is gone, that's why that bank, or that's why whoever is trying to get paid would potentially reach out to you if they don't get a hold of their actual client, because the house is the collateral.
Yeah.
And so you don't want to get some foreclosure notice on something that you've never had.
Right.
Exactly.
And that is, again, how the title insurance.
And you just got to the point which I didn't get to yet, which is that if no one pays them, technically that lender can go foreclose on that property to get back their $25,000. They can force the sale of that house that the buyer now owns, and they've owned now maybe 6 months, 12 months, and then suddenly they get served with foreclosure paperwork. I've never seen it get to that point because someone's going to get notices that something's due, and then they're going to come back to us, the settlement agent, the closing attorney, and we're going to get it fixed. But this is fairly rare, but this is why lenders absolutely 100% of the time require a lender's policy, and 99% of buyers want an owner's policy as well for this kind of protection. So yeah.
One thing I'll say to that is, because it does say, like, when you look at our forms, it will say this policy is optional. As it's promulgated by the state of Florida, a simultaneous policy is only $25. And then there are additional forms to what Jerron was talking about, where we as lenders require certain things, and it changes whether it's a condo, whether it's the type of property, changes all of that. That being said, as as you're going through that process, some of the things that we have noticed over in my career is that there is, in South Florida where we are, you will see some title companies try and take advantage of individuals, and instead of charging the $25 plus the form, so let's say it should be, I don't know, $150, $200 for that secondary policy, all of that, you'll see charges of like $1,000 on a simultaneous policy. And like, I always stay out of everybody's fees because it's not my business to tell you what you should be charging. That's someone else's
unscrupulous.
Business. But there's just, to me, like, when it gets ridiculous like that, like I will step in and I'll say something.
Good, and that's what a good loan officer should do. Is it gets to a point where it's abusing a client because most people don't know. You don't know. You just see the settlement statement. It's got all kinds of big numbers on there
and somebody will say it's promulgated by the state, which is a true statement on one policy.
On that policy.
Not on what you're charging
but
on
not
the
on the
second.
simultaneous issue, which we're getting a little technical here. But again, this is just, if you're a consumer listening to this right now, or a possible borrower, or someone who's going to buy a property, the takeaway from this is make sure you have an advocate on your side. Make sure you have a great loan officer, someone that's really working for you, or have a good title company if you want to use a title company, or get an attorney, even if it's not us. I would recommend, if I'm going to pay the same amount of money to a title company, I'm going to get a lawyer, because if I'm going to pay the same or more or less the same, I'd rather have that lawyer on my side.
Because you can provide additional services.
Exactly.
So let's talk about that. Obviously, I know you're up to date on NAR. We've talked about it with our 3 previous guests that were all successful real estate brokers. One of the things that I've heard as a potential that's going to happen is, well, if I don't need a buyer's agent, or if I'm going to pay for a buyer's agent, why don't I just hire an attorney? It's significantly cheaper. The attorney can negotiate, can write the contract. If I can drive to the house and see the house on my own, especially if I'm the one that's finding the house online. Do you think, or do you see there's an opportunity where attorney-based firms will start to kind of, it won't work necessarily in your world for you because, for being in Palm Beach County, sellers and listing agents are your clients. So for you to go and create a new company where you're trying to kick out the buying agent, you're kind of, killing the hand that feeds you. But do you see other attorneys trying to get in the real estate game and saying, hey, you don't need a buyer's agent. We're happy to represent you and charge you a flat fee?
So let me answer this simply first, and then I'll go a little more complex. So first of all, let me start by saying, without getting too deep into that NAR decision, realtors provide a great value. A great service. The value is determined by the market, which will figure out where that's going to go on the buy side. But they provide a great service. A good realtor or an excellent realtor is invaluable sometimes, and they oftentimes show their value in the price negotiations, but in other things too, in finding and lining up the right inspectors, in helping you through the process and the contract, and finding the right vendors and the right movers and all of it, and being a concierge. So I'm a supporter of realtors. What the market is going to do with the buy-side realtors and their commissions, we'll see. We have a lot of theories that are out there. That's not why you have me, and that's not the question. But already I do get a decent amount of clients that call us for buyer representation and seller representation. That can look a few different ways. That can be larger commercial deals, so a multifamily, retail, industrial. Of course, typically both sides on a larger deal of a $2 million, $5 million, $10 million deal are going to have attorneys just because of the complexity of the deal and the price points involved and the risk involved with the money. That's the first thing. Second of all, even in residential deals, I've seen a major uptick in our representation, especially of buyers in the past 4 years. We've always had a pipeline of clients coming here down to the East Coast, Southeast Florida, from New York and New Jersey and Massachusetts and the Northeast. But we saw a real flood of that, which you all know, and you've experienced that in the past 4 years with COVID, and it hasn't stopped. Right. And so many of those clients are used to having attorneys because they bought and sold their homes in the Northeast, and they want to have an attorney on their side. It's what they're used to. Even when their agents say you don't need an attorney, many of them still do get one. Comfort. Exactly. So even if, let's say in Palm Beach County, where the seller's choosing the settlement agent, we do a good amount of buyer representation. And keep in mind, too, that we also work, because we're right here in Boca, we're on the border of Broward and Palm Beach. So we do get a lot of title deals that we are the settlement agent on in Broward as well, where they choose us as the settlement agent. Your question, though, I think was whether we would go out there and target clients.
Not you.
Yeah.
No. So
okay. Explain
what I was saying specifically is that because of you already have deep-rooted relationships with agents, just like I do, I wouldn't go out and do anything that would potentially harm my referral partners. It's not smart business, right? But what I'm saying is, do you see an opportunity where law firms are going to decide to say, hey, why should you pay on $1 million transaction? Okay,
sure.
Why should
a buyer pay 2% or 3%? Yeah.
3%, $30,000 for someone to do that. I, as an attorney, will represent you legally, negotiate, write your contract offer, and I'll do it for a flat fee of $5,000.
Yes. So the market is going to dictate that, and the market is going to lead more buyers our way. I'm 99.9% confident of that. It is already, I won't say happening because of the NAR decision, but again, I've seen that uptick just in the last 3 to 4 years, and I think it's only the beginning of more and more of this. People who are there's what I call do-it-yourselfers. Those are like the flatfee.com people, or they're the for listing their properties, like FSBO
for sale by
owner. They're doing for sale by owner to any of these companies that are out there, and they'll go and do it for $99 or $199, and they just want to do it themselves. There's on the other end of the spectrum are the people that really know nothing and they want to trust the professionals, and they're going to pay the 6% commission and for a realtor on the listing side, and that realtor is going to do their commission split with the buyer side. And then there's people in the middle. And especially on the buy side, some people will make calls on Zillow and call the listing agent directly without a realtor because they're just screwing around. But I think they may get to a point even after they've started a process where they start to get uncomfortable. And I see that, and I get these calls, and I have these clients on a regular basis that call me, and they've started this process, and they tell me, well, there's only one agent on the transaction. It's a listing agent, and I called them directly, and I'm in contract or getting in contract with them. But at this point, I don't really trust them. They don't have my best interests in mind, so I need your help. So the short answer is there is going to be a lot more of that now that many of these clients, or even more than there were before, are not using buyer's agents.
You mentioned something there that I think is an interesting point. for all of these lawsuits, whether you agree or disagree is not at all where this question lies. Of all things, the only, like, to me, the biggest gross miss in the lawsuit that I just don't comprehend, because I don't think there's collusion in the first place. I don't agree with the lawsuit, the premise of it. The only thing, if I were on my end of it saying like that it shouldn't be allowed, I don't see how someone can represent a buyer and a seller equally. Just as an attorney, you don't represent both sides. Like, you can't. I just don't understand how that got left out of anything. I would think if anyone was going to sue over anything, would be that before anything else.
Yeah, like a transactional agent where they're on.
Yeah, but I also think, and this is just from an outsider's point of view, if you're representing both sides, you ultimately want the deal to get done, right? And I think there's this kind of, the agent is probably pulling both sides together to make them meet in the middle, to make the deal the best for both, so they're both happy. So they're kind of working on behalf of both of them, but everybody wants, the end goal is to be a closing, a sale, keys handed over, and the agent gets paid.
So I read something a long time ago. That is definitely a theory, and hopefully the great realtors that are out there, and there are many of them, we work with many of them, I'm sure that is one of their main goals, is to make sure both parties walk away happy, because that's where their business is, or future business, referral business. Yeah. But it was funny, this kind of goes alongside it. I read something, they did a study years ago, and I wish I could recap it. I hope I can recap it quickly. Essentially, it's about price negotiations, and they said that essentially the conclusion of the study, after doing a long study, was that realtors, many realtors, or the average realtor, the main goal is to get the transaction done and closed, and it's not so much to fight for the extra $5,000 or $10,000 for, let's say, the buyer to get a lower price, or maybe on the other side, the seller side. Because if you think about it, if their commission's 3%, what's 3% of a $10,000 reduction on a $700,000 property? It's $300. So are they going to be fighting tooth and nail over $300? But it's worth $9,700 to the buyer. So it's just, the goal is to make their 3% of the 700,000 or of the 690, let's say, to get across the finish line, which there is something to be said for that. So I give a counterpoint to the study that was done, which is, the goal is to get across the finish line. I mean, ultimately, will the buyer and seller look back 3 years from later and say, that $10,000 difference, man, that made all the difference in the world, and my life has been worse ever since. No one thinks about that 3 years later. So, but they're happy that they're in their house most of the time, the buyer is, and the seller's happy they parted ways with the house.
And I think it's stressful for the buyer and the seller. So if you have an agent that knows the secret sauce to get the seller to really budge, or the buyer, they can kind of negotiate and play both sides to each other's benefit to get things moving along.
So you're advocating for the double dip?
Yeah.
Okay. So, no, this is good.
This is good.
So
if I was an agent, my goal would be to double dip everywhere.
100%.
Yeah.
Because you're getting 6% commission in theory, assuming you've negotiated both sides to 3%.
But there's more control in it.
Yes, but this is where, okay, perfect. So now all of a sudden I'm going to buy a home, and Jerron has made an offer, but he doesn't have representation. I have representation. My offer is the same, if not very close. You are put in a position where many of agents, depending on how much business they do, how much they need that additional, that additional funds, now you as the agent might say, Jerron, make your offer $10,000 more. And you're doing that because you heard of privileged information as a listing agent based on my offer. Now, do they do that? It happens.
Well, of course it happens, but ultimately it's going to be the buyer. So the buyer, and the way that you play it is, I understand really what they're looking for, what their motivation is, and what's going to kind of get them off the fence. This is what that looks like. Totally up to you if that's worth it to you. We can go find a different place. But if you want to say, what's going to be that piece that gets me to the finish line with them, and I, as the agent who's representing them, know it, they can make a decision on what they want with the information. They don't have to buy. But, sometimes it's like, what's it going to take to make this deal happen? And then if that's something that you're willing to settle with, then you can move forward with it and everybody's good to go.
Yeah, I get both sides. I have my my poor me story, which is I was getting married. Well, both of you know my wife. Getting married. This was 7 years ago, I guess. It was
a gem.
Well, thank you. She is. She's the better half. It was a few months before marriage. I was looking around for houses for 7-8 months. And she wasn't even able to participate generally because she was in Trinidad. We fly back and forth and see each other. But so I was going around with my buddy who was a realtor, Michael Kelly, great guy, and not related to me, different spelling Kelly. But he took me around to, I can't tell you how many houses, over 6 months, 7 months. And we finally found this house, and it's over here in East Boca, right on the end of a canal. It was awesome, perfect location. It needed a lot of work, but it was a nice ranch style, and it was the only one house in these canals that we have here that are on the intracoastal that look down the canal. So every other house looks at the backyards of each other's house. So you're staring in each other's back doors. Yeah. So this, I was like, wow, these houses don't come up very often. So I don't remember the exact price or offer I put in. If I recall, maybe it was like $925. If I think so, or $825 or $925. I think it was $925. Put in an offer. Came with my agent. Met the agent who was there in the house, and he said, "Okay, great." I said, "I want to make an offer. We'll have it over to you today." I said, "Do you think this might get it done?" He's like, he was very nonchalant about it. He said, "Yeah, put in the offer." He's like, "It's a family. The parents, one parent died, the other's in a assisted living facility. The kids are making the decisions. I submit all offers to them." Great, thanks. So, long story short, it didn't get done. It didn't get signed. I was very bummed. They didn't even counteroffer. I was like, "What the heck is going on here?" So we kept looking, and there was something in the back of my mind. I said, let me just keep an eye on this because maybe it'll come back on market or whatever it is. Well, a month later, it was about 35 days later, I saw that the property had closed and sold, and it sold for $925,000. And guess what? That same agent, I won't name this agent here, but he got both sides of the deal. So meaning 35 days later, which most contracts are 30 days.
Did you know that was coming?
So no, but I have my own story.
My suspicion is that he didn't want to, he wanted to make the full 5 or 6%. So he wanted a buyer that didn't have representation, and he had a lot of control because this was a family in Chicago that was relying on him. And he either didn't submit the contract or said, "Yeah, there's one here, but let's wait and let's give it time." And then found some the next day and said, "Well, someone made an offer for $925. If you make it, I probably can get this done." And boom, there it is. So
have you heard there's a product called Final Offer that's
and by the way, that house today probably would be worth $3.5 million, I'd say.
Damn.
So, and that's 7 years ago, maybe more.
So I have a very similar story, same thing. I think we were 25,000 under, and at the price point that we were making an offer, it's ridiculous. And it sold for $2 million more 2 years after we missed out on it. So.
Yeah, we all have our sob stories. But
okay, I stand corrected. It might not always work.
No, there's a lot of great realtors.
Too much money for it. It's the incentive. Listen, it's the same thing that when people will ask me, "All right, well, listen, you were in the mortgage industry way back when, you guys are at fault for this epidemic and all the things that happened in the first mortgage meltdown." And I say, no, not really. Just like a pharmaceutical rep isn't at fault for selling certain drugs that they sell. At the end of the day, it's whoever is putting that product out there. If the incentive, right, we're capitalists here. If the incentive to sell this product is 5 times more than it is to sell this product over here, why wouldn't I sell that
It's human
product?
nature.
It's human nature. Mm-hmm. So, it's up to, and Jerron and I sit on the same side of the aisle on this one. We're both anti-regulation on a lot of different things. So for me, I'm not about trying to create all this regulation, but I do want the ability in real estate where, I think the buyer-broker agreement is going to be fantastic in so many ways for the real estate agent to have protection. The same sob story is the reverse where, we know so many agents who have spent weekends, countless weekends, showing homes for someone. Yep. And then all of a sudden, someone just, on their way home, they saw an open house sign. They walked in. Yep. The listing agent said, "Hey, by the way," and there you go again, double representation because that's and the person think about that person, that's taking their time where they're taking their weekend time, that they're not spending their kids, they're making certain sacrifices to honor their profession, and then all of a sudden they get screwed.
I think that is one of the silver linings. There'll be multiple, but I think that one of the silver linings is that it's going to force buyers
loyalty and stickiness.
That's it. Get that. When it becomes the industry standard that everyone needs to get something signed from a buyer, then they're just going to have to do it and have to ask the tough question, because right now what's preventing them from doing it is that no other agents are asking for this. So why are they going to be the one agent that's forcing their client into a corner and pushing them in a corner, being like, you have to buy with me and only me? You know,
it's so normal. You don't hire an attorney typically, like when in any business transaction, without paying a retainer, you know, and then the fees get deducted. Like that, I think it's just very commonplace. I think the industry will adapt very quickly. I think so too. It will. It's like change.
It's change. No one likes it. It's going to be 6 months of chaos or controlled chaos, but it'll get better. So, and I think in the end, you know, for consumers, it's probably better in most respects in that it's going to be transparency. They're going to have choices, and it's going to be sign on the dotted line. And, you know, this is what you're getting into. Because, to be honest, we've mentioned several things already just in our short time here in the conversation and one of the common themes we have here is a lack of transparency, whether it's some title company or law firm overcharging for a simultaneous issue on a policy that should be $150 instead they're charging $1,000. Not cool, not very ethical. We're talking about transactional brokers handling both sides and not submitting contracts or, you know, using their knowledge to their benefit. All of this is if we can get rid of this in the industry, it's better for the consumer.
So I haven't done my research, so this is by far not an endorsement of the product. But I heard about a product called Final Offer. And essentially what it does is it almost is like an auction where so let's say the house at the end of the canal that you get to look down, that you love, you get to actually see what bids are going on the house. So the concept is that, let's say if that person did come in and did 930, you'd be notified. So from a seller's perspective,
so it's like an auction.
It's an auction.
It's an open auction.
Like an open auction, a visible type auction.
It's fantastic for the seller, though.
It's amazing for the seller. That's true capitalism. You're getting as much money. The only downside I can think of is if your house doesn't have, the desirability, I guess.
And then as a seller, you're just oh my God.
Well, right.
But you only have one offer. Well, then it's maybe not so good if you have no offer.
That's my point. If you don't have any offers,
the guy's like, I'm in control. I don't see anything else. Yeah. I guess you would only fire that up if you have a minimum of 2 offers about the same time.
Could you imagine something like that during the time right after COVID when the market was going wild and people were willing to just
prices
go
would have been 20% higher than even now.
You keep jumping. Right. Everybody, it's no different than an auction.
Yeah.
You know, 500. Can I get 600? 600. Can I get 700?
Well, you gotta listen. If loans don't work out for you, you got a career, bro.
Yes, auctioneer.
You just need a cowboy hat, I think.
Oh, geez. I am going to Arizona on Saturday.
Nice.
So,
what are you doing?
I'm going
Can you disclose it?
No, there's an event. Housing Wire has an event called The Gathering.
Okay.
And it's just a bunch of mortgage and real estate CEOs and presenters, and should be
educational.
Really
you'll get some good speakers.
Always trying to grab information from other people.
It's perfect.
Stealing is way easier. It's the fastest form of R&D.
Borrowing.
It's R&D.
Yeah.
Yes.
Repurposing information.
Yes, repurposing.
He goes away to these trips, and they're wonderful because he learns so much and he gets so much, and he's an avid note taker, and he comes back with a really full yellow legal pad. And then Jared and I, our CEO,
get to suffer with the ideas.
Get ready. There's going to be a whirlwind of
ideas.
New ideas, new systems, new processes, new things, new directions. And it's this load of information that he's like, all right, now take this and go do it. And you're like,
Emmanuel's the visionary.
All right, let's shift.
He puts the capital V in visionary.
Yes. Yeah. You know what it is? It's I listen to somebody talk, and I'll listen to a podcast. I'll listen to something. It doesn't matter, in person,
and then
a book,
it goes like this.
And then I'm like, ooh, we should apply that in our business.
Yeah.
And if you just do this little tweak here, or like in anything, like it could be at a restaurant, the way they're serving you or the way that they're giving you the check. Like there's so many ways that I guess I just appreciate the system and process of so many things.
And the wheels start moving.
The wheels start turning, yeah.
Yes.
And then the orders start flying via email.
I will say to that, though, so we have a weekly meeting that we meet with all of the managers, and a lot of the people that I know that I talk to daily know that I have this meeting every Thursday at 8:30 a.m. So I was talking to somebody on my way home this morning I drove over from Naples, and they're like, how was your exec call? And I was like, really good. And I was like, you know what I kind of love is, yes, we're busier and our pipeline is growing and, loans are coming in and it's feeling really good, the momentum, but like every department has stuff that they're working on that is unique to their department, but not a part of their everyday. And it's not just, okay, let's work through the closing department. It's building stuff out. It's improving on something. Something didn't happen the right way. And so then there was a shift or an idea that came in from a trip that we were able to implement. So at the end of today's call, we could talk about how busy we are as far as revenue and stuff like that, but everybody's working on these different projects and it's to get better.
I love it.
I always like to give him a hard time, but it's a lot of him driving all of us to think outside of the box, driving us to push harder and be better and be on the forefront of things and be proactive rather than reactive. And that's why all these departments are doing this, which is really cool. Because I would say that most companies, not even mortgage companies, but just companies in general, don't have that way of thinking. And so, there's a lot of work and there's a lot of tweaking and there's a lot of back and forth and everything else that goes on behind the scenes. But we're always pushing for more, which is really kind of cool that we can talk about stuff other than the actual day-to-day business part of it.
That's great. And along with that, what you did say, but also what you didn't say, and I've experienced this and witnessed this, is that you all have very structured meetings for certain things, like for the sales team or for the ops team or whatever it is, and you stick to it and you have it and you have a plan for the calls and you prepare for it, and whoever the manager or the supervisor is or whoever's responsible for that comes in with an agenda, and it's, let's get down to business. And that's fantastic, because I'll admit, we have 22 plus, I don't know, let's say 26 people in our company. We do have meetings periodically, but I don't have set meetings on the calendar for my litigation department and my title and closing department and then my partners. And I have them when I feel as needed.
Right.
But I do think that a lot of times we just get in the grind and we're working in the business and not working on it. And when you have these strategy meetings, you pull yourself out of the working in and you get to the working on, which is great to do. Even if it's only for a half an hour a week or an hour a week to focus on that, because it's going to be more
productive.
It's going to be in the back of your mind as you're working throughout the week once you have that meeting. So I think it's powerful.
I think as a company, what it does is it really, it pushes us really fast to where we're going to go. And I think that when we go, a year from now, 2 years from now, and you look at the growth that we'll have had while all other mortgage companies are shrinking, we'll be able to go back and say, well, these were the things that they were working on while everybody else was worried about cost cutting. I'm today I had a meeting with this group that I belong to, and it's all owners of mortgage companies, and they're still just talking about cost cutting. Like you can't cost cut your way to profit. Like you got to talk about revenue growth. What are your ideas in order to generate more revenue, to get more loans, to help more buyers, to help more real estate agents, to find buyers and to close loans, right? We were just so I feel like so many people get caught up in the wrong things too much, and they don't truly have a vision of where they're going or how they're going to get there.
Yeah, I read a book 20-some years ago from the former chief marketing officer of Coca-Cola. It was in elementary school. The former CMO of Coca-Cola. And one of the first things he says in the book is that invariably, whenever there's a recession, every major company, the first thing they cut is sales and marketing. Why would you cut sales and marketing? Especially, I mean, sure, you can say sales especially, but marketing that's that is your way to revenue, because there's only one way to profitability. It's either cost cutting or it's increasing revenue.
Right.
Sure, I get that you may want to cut some costs here and there and trim the fat. Absolutely, it makes sense. But you got to be focused on revenue. The other thing that I think you're getting at when there is, I won't say that we're in a recession. Some people could argue we were or we are.
We're in a housing recession.
We're in a housing recession, and we're certainly in a mortgage recession. I mean, mortgages are down 90+% from what they were a few years ago. But my point is that you can take market share. This is the perfect opportunity when you're a company like yours is, and you're here, and sure, you serve the state of Florida, but you're most present here in South Florida. You can really increase your market share, which I know you are doing, and that's what you're working on. And this is the opportunity to do that. But Absolutely. You got to spend. You got to spend to make. So
you do. You got to spend. You got to spend in the right places, and you got to be strategic. And you and I discussed off air some of the strategies, some of the things that we're working on that are truly unique. And I think that stepping outside the box is going to be important in any industry, but especially now. Mm-hmm. I do want to pivot to talking a little bit about the foreclosure aspect of your business, and then also how it relates, because one of the we're going to call it myths because we're in agreement. But one of the things that many people are saying is, I'm going to hold off on purchasing because I'm going to wait for foreclosures to come out, and I want to get this great deal. I'm going to buy this house, and I'm going to buy it from a foreclosure.
Yeah.
So talk about the foreclosure aspect of your business, and then why we're not going to have any.
So I watch, if you talk to my wife, she'll tell you that, I'm addicted to YouTube. When I go home, I get my food. We barely even eat together anymore. I go sit on my couch. I've got my TV tray. I'm like a little kid. I'm there watching. But I'm not watching cartoons. I'm watching economic shows.
Are we supposed to give you a bravo on that one?
Definitely not. And please don't let Leanna watch this video. I watch a lot of economics. I watch a lot of different things. But economics is one of the things I really love watching, or market analysis and what's going on in the economy. And my point, though, is that there's always a certain percentage of doomers that are on there. And they keep saying that this market is going to crash. They've been saying this for 10 years now. Yeah. Market's going to crash. It's any time now. It's April 15th. It's going to crash. May 22nd. It's going to crash. Watch out. So what do they say? A broken clock is right twice a day. They're trying to be right twice a decade, or once every 20 years, really. When I first started my law firm back in 2010 with my partner, the only thing that was out there for us to do in real estate was foreclosure defense, short sales, loan mods, bankruptcies. And we started on the consumer side of things. Pretty quickly, within a year, we had about 100+ clients that were paying us $400 a month for foreclosure defense, because there was probably anywhere from 100 to 300 new foreclosures being filed per day between Broward and Palm Beach County alone, 2 counties in the state of Florida. So we were sending out mailers. We were spending $5,000–6,000 a month on mailers. We're getting a nice 2% response rate on it, building our client base. My point, though, is that we are as far from those days as you could possibly be. I've looked at the most recent foreclosure filings, and there's a handful per day. There might be, 2 one day. There might be 5 another. Some of them get canceled because people cure their balances, or they get a loan modification, or whatever it is. We are not having a foreclosure crisis, and it's not coming, in my personal opinion.
To give some context to that, for anyone who doesn't know, when he's talking about 2010, so the crash that we had in 2008 and 2009, we started coming out of that crash in 2010. Mm-hmm. It was the exact opposite of what we've just recently have experienced. There was so much supply, so much inventory. The key then was trying to find buyers. And today the market has, here we are 13 years later, the market has shifted completely. Yeah. Yes. And, last year in 23, inventory was a gigantic issue. Mm-hmm. This is not trying to find buyers. We have so many people who are looking to buy. And in fact, one of the problems that they talk about is what's called the lock-in effect, where individuals have such low interest rates on their current homes, they're not willing to sell their house. But back to the
100%.
Back to the point about the low foreclosures, that theory where, hey, all these foreclosures are going to add to the inventory. Adding inventory would therefore
drop prices because it creates more buyers, supply demand, increased demand. If supply stays the same, then you have a price drop. That's just supply demand curve.
Now there's just too many buyers, so people don't need to go into foreclosure.
Well, they're back to his point. There's a limited amount of properties on the market, because I'll give you a quick 20-second example of me and my wife. We've lived in our home for 7 years now. You know, our firm's doing well. My wife makes a nice salary. We have thought about getting more house, more bang for the buck. Her boss is very generous, by the way. One thing I didn't tell you is Emmanuel is actually her boss. But we've thought about getting a bigger home. It's 7 years, and you know, maybe we'll get something a little nicer, move to a nicer neighborhood. But we're in that 3.75% rate. I don't want to lose that. And I don't know. You know, we're kind of locked in. It's that lock-in effect. Could we do it? We can. Is it absolutely critical that we do it? No. So I'm always toying with it. I'm kind of on the fence. And I think there's a lot of people like us who are either on the fence or that are truly locked in and they just can't afford a home that's a little bigger or even the same size if they were to go buy it today in their same neighborhood at a 7% rate or 6.75% rate. But here's what I would say, getting back to the foreclosure question, is our problem today is not that we're about to have some avalanche of people that can't make their payments. The few people that are falling behind on their payments have so much buried equity in their property because property prices have been increasing so much here in Florida and really in many places across the country the last few years that why would they ever get foreclosed on? They'll go to any desperate measure to get caught up on those payments when they have $300,000 in equity in their property or $500,000 in equity or whatever the amount is. So the difference is that in 2008, 9, 10, 11, even 12, is that people were underwater in these properties. They bought a house for $600,000. 2 years later, that property's worth $350,000. They're $250,000 underwater. They fall behind their payments. They just hand their keys back. I watch clients do that. They'd be like, why would I pay you $400 a month to defend my foreclosure? And I say, because I can keep you in the property for 2 or 3 years.
Like, I already owe money on it.
Yeah, but it's fine. Either hand your keys in now or hand your keys in 3 years later, pay me $400 a month and not have to pay your $2,500 a month mortgage payment. So many clients did that. That's a whole nother discussion. I think the real problem today, though, that borrowers need to face is that they're going to miss the boat. And here's why. Not to get too macroeconomic, but we are spending about $4 trillion in excess deficit spending per year, meaning our federal budget is X number of $1 trillion. We're spending $4 trillion over what we're taking in, so we're borrowing that money. That is what's causing inflation. The pundits on air don't really like to talk about it. All they focus on is the Fed going to lower or increase rates? Is it going to be up? Are they going to have decreases or are they going to have increases or what's going on? But what's happening in the background? We're printing $4 trillion extra per year. They printed like 40% of the money that's ever been in circulation in the last 2.5 years. That's why we have inflation. And that's why the Fed can't drop rates. It's because the Congress has a flamethrower spending $4 trillion extra dollars per year printing this money, and the Fed has a fire hose trying to put the fire out. And the two, it's not working. Like the inflation is still much higher than what they need. My point in saying all this is that I think prices are going to continue increasing because of inflation. When there is inflation, asset prices increase. It's just, it happens every single time there's ever been inflation. So if you don't get into a property now and you don't buy a property, that same property in 2 or 3 years may be worth 25% or 30% more than it is today. And I think that's what you're going to see next, is you're going to see inflation actually continue to tick up. I predict, I'll put $100 here today, that 6 months from now to 9 months from now, that the Fed may actually have to increase rates. So get in while the getting's good. That's my opinion. It's my personal opinion. So buy now. That's my personal opinion. So
another thing that we didn't touch on, but regarding the foreclosures, is that during COVID, which is where all this equity came from. Right? In general, most properties appreciated 50% or more just during COVID. But the especially for us down here in South Florida, the Great Migration. But I think that also what happened is that banks during that time were forced to figure out how to not foreclose on people, how to put people in forbearance, how to backload the interest, and come up with all of these different measures.
Creative programs.
But to your point, because the values had increased so much, their collateral, which is the house, so their investment was very safe.
It is still safe. They're below their 70% LTV or whatever.
Still very safe. So why would you not play ball?
Just modify the loan. Bury the balance back in, get them back to current.
Just keep printing money. Printing money. That's all we need to do, right?
That's all we need to do. Everyone wins. Everyone wins. Until you go to the grocery store and you look at your bill.
Yeah.
Yes.
Then you're like, this
card's half empty.
So in summary, I'm a proponent of getting in while the getting's good. There's something else as a psychological effect for those of us who are like 40 and over and who live through that. And not Sarah. Everyone but Sarah. Just me and Amin.
I'm not sure about that.
Just me and E-Man. Anyone who lived through that mortgage crisis in 2007, 8, 9, 10, especially who was in the business, or who had financial problems and couldn't afford their payments or maybe were foreclosed on, we're scarred by that. And we look through the glasses that we have of thinking that same thing is going to happen again, because that's how we see a crisis. We're in a completely different crisis now. We're in an inflationary crisis where, okay, if you made $150,000 in salary last year and you make $150,000 this year, you're poor. You're poor. You're like maybe $20,000 a year poor because of inflation, because everything has gone up. Yeah. Groceries and gas and everything across the board is more expensive.
That's why we're very thankful.
Because people say, "Oh yeah, I've got a job and I'm making $150,000 a year. I didn't lose my job." That's great. That's good. Yeah. You can afford to survive, but maybe you got to cut back on your vacations a little bit. Maybe you got to hold on to that car. Normally you get a new car every 3 to 4 years, but now people are coming out of their leases and buying the car and saying, "Okay, I'm just going to keep my 4-year-old Lexus, rather than buying a new one." These are the decisions that the average Americans are making nowadays. So
I think property taxes also is a big thing.
Of course.
So if you look at,
killer.
But we're in the same boat. I would love to get a bigger home. And when you look at the property taxes for what you paid on your house 7 years ago, you homestead, it only goes up 3% per year, and versus what you would buy, because now your same house is worth double, triple what you paid. So even just to get the equivalent home, the property taxes would almost be triple.
And don't even talk about insurance. Let's not even go to insurance, which is double what it was, 4 years ago.
I don't know what's happening with all these college students. They're just going to have to move back in with mom and dad, I guess. I mean, it's affordability, because it's not like renting is cheaper.
No, it's not.
What are you going to do?
Renting is very expensive.
I feel we're very fortunate.
And also, when you rent, you come in with first, last, and security, plus whatever fees for application, deposit, yada, yada. So if you're paying $4,500 a month in rent, you come in with all of that money up front. That's a lot of money.
It is a lot of money. And I would dare you to find somewhere at $1,500 per month.
I said $4,500.
Oh, 45 times 3.
Times
okay.
3.
$4,500 a month.
You're right. So then you're going to come up with $13,500. Yeah, no, I agree. It's crazy. What are they? I mean, now we're getting hyper local here, but I was driving by the new apartments over on. We're in the Delray Boca area here, but off of Atlantic and Congress that are on the northwest corner. That's not even the nicest area, and you're a whole, a mile away from the Ave, and I heard studios there are going for like $3,000. It's just absolute insanity what's going on with rents too. So
I just don't know how it corrects itself. Unless you have a full-blown stock market crash, which why would it?
Why would it crash?
There's nothing.
All assets keep climbing in an inflationary environment. They're just creating new money and they're just throwing it out there.
So we need more money printed, really generous bosses.
We need to balance our budgets is what we need.
And everybody's going to be happy.
All right. In wrapping up, Jerron, give us a lesson. Give us a lesson, a lawyerly lesson about real estate that you've bought many homes. He's not just a homeowner for his primary residence, but he has lots of investment properties. So let's go that route.
Okay.
During COVID, you decided to really go after lots of multifamilies. Mm-hmm. So talk a little bit about the investment purchases and why that makes something interesting and why you went that route. Because I know the reasons why, and I know financial why you go after whenever inflation rises. You're supposed to buy multifamilies specifically.
I was fortunate, lucky, informed, whatever. I could argue different things. Maybe this is now my wife can watch this part. All the YouTube videos I watched. I saw these guys saying Congress is printing money. They just printed $2 trillion in this stimulus, and the CARES Act was $4 trillion, and this and whatever, or whatever it added up to be. Inflation is going to be coming here. It's down the pike, and the whole time the Fed's saying no, there's no inflation, and then inflation's transitory. But even before they got to inflation is transitory, I said, my wife and I had already owned 10 units for a number of years. And I said, you know what? We could either maybe go get a bigger house, but then I've got to pay for this overhead. I said, or we can take this money and we can go put it to work and have the tenants paying the overhead for the same amount of assets that I could leverage with my own house versus with investment property. So, there's really three main benefits, one, maybe four, to investment properties. One is you have price appreciation, of course. So over time, because of inflation, prices appreciate. But also, I knew that the South Florida area has very limited multifamily housing, especially workforce housing. I don't invest in the high-end, $1 million investment condos. These are workforce, like a 2-bedroom, 1-bath might rent for about $1,800 in the units that I invest in. So I invest in duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes, up to 4 units, and then we have 2 sixplexes as well, 6 units. Appreciation. Second is that the tenants are paying me rent, and I'm then paying the mortgage. So I've got mortgage pay down. So I'm paying the balance of the mortgage down over time, and the tenants are doing it. They're paying me to pay down my own mortgage. So I love that.
Beautiful.
It's beautiful. Third thing is that there's something called tax depreciation. So I'm able to do depreciation on these properties, and also something called accelerated depreciation, where I'm able to get a lot of money back from the federal government and reduce the amount of taxes that I pay.
This is why we owe $4 trillion. You're the guy. No, just kidding.
I am the guy. Hey, we're back to capitalists. If you see a weakness, you exploit it. That's it.
It's the system.
Which on that note, actually, again, back to being informed in YouTube videos, watching some of these things about what is the game that the uber rich play. So they play a game of, okay, yeah, you want to start a business, then you want to grow your business, then you want to be top of market in your business and be making tons of money, millions of dollars. But then when you get all this money, and you get a business that's hyper successful, not that I'm saying my business is hyper successful, but I'm in the game. I want to grow. I want to grow my business. What is the next game to play? And the next game is the legal tax shelter game. It's paying less money to the federal government. How can I keep more money in my pocket of the money that I earned? And depreciation, people should look into it about how to depreciate properties, investment properties, and get that money. So that's more capital that I don't pay the federal government that I'm then able to reinvest into more and more properties, and it just kind of snowballs from that. So, and then the fourth advantage, of course, is the basic one, which is any cash flow that I get from the rent beyond the mortgage and the insurance and the other expenses, repairs and things like that. From a 2-bedroom, $1,800 a month, maybe I'm putting $300 of that in my pocket. The rest is going towards the mortgage and the insurance and everything else. But it's nice. I get a few hundred extra shekels in my pocket, and so that was our strategy, and we loaded up on some properties, and we're up to 37 units now, and we're
awesome. Congratulations.
That's
thank
amazing.
you. But I know you guys do a lot of investor loans. We did most of our loans through Choice Mortgage, and locking in great. The one last thing is the great thing. The thing that I love about 4 units and less and investing in quadplexes, triplexes, duplexes, or even maybe single-family homes as rentals is that you can lock in a 30-year mortgage. So we were able to lock in a 30-year mortgage at some of these great rates at 4% and 3.75 and 4.5%. And now rates are up to 6.5, 7, maybe low 7s, depending on your credit. Mm-hmm. But if my theory is correct, and I could be wrong, but I think a year from now or a year and a half from now, we may look back and be like, darn it, I should have locked in that 6.75 or that 6.875% rate. And guess what? If I'm wrong and you went and bought a duplex or a triplex and you through Choice Mortgage and you get that 30-year mortgage, and let's say rates do come down a point or a point and a half, just refi the property, right? Get that 5% rate. So it's kind of win-win on both ways. So my last point that I'll make here is that rates should never cause paralysis. Don't have paralysis by analysis because you are predicting the market or thinking that a rate is going to go up by 0.5 point. You're trying to catch that perfect rate. I'm waiting for that last quarter point. If it goes down a quarter point, then I'm going to spring on this property. No. Just get in and be in an action, and then you can always correct a decision later, again, with a refi or whatever you're doing. So,
Awesome. Well, Jerron, thank you so much for being on the show with us. For the audience, anybody who wants to use your lawyerly services and title services, please let them know how they can get a hold of you.
Absolutely. You could go to our website, kellygrantlaw.com. Kelly is with an EY, KELLEY, GRANTLAW.com, or give us a call at our office, 877-871-8300. And we can probably put that in the subject line of the video.
Absolutely.
We'll put it in the show notes. And for everybody else, we'll do a little cowabunga as you're waiting on rates and to catch that perfect wave. But for the rest of us,
will you put my OnlyFans
we're going to lock in. You want that one for your wife too?
There we go.
So, I'm officially announcing this on here, babe.
Yes.
I'm making $0 a month, but it's fun.
There you go. So again, thanks everyone for listening, and we'll catch you next time.
Take care. Bye-bye. Thanks for having me.
Okay, that's enough whining for one day. We are so happy that you could join us today on Stop Whining About Real Estate. So please, not only listen, but subscribe, follow us, download, share, and if you're feeling it, give us a 5-star review. Hey, and if you'd like to be a guest on the show, please email stopwhining@choicemortgage.com. Thanks so much.